What if the person you look down on today turned out to be the one who held your future in their hands? This is the shocking story of Patrick, a CEO who disguised himself as a janitor to find out what his employees were really like when nobody was watching. What he discovered in those hallways changed everything and revealed truths about loyalty, respect, and greed that you won't see coming. Stick with this video because the ending will leave you questioning how you treat people in your own life. And if this is your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss stories that reveal the surprising lessons hidden in everyday life. The city skyline glittered in the late morning sun as Patrick Steele leaned against the floor-to-ceiling window of his corner office. On paper, Patrick had everything: wealth, recognition, and the kind of power that turned heads in boardrooms. He was the CEO of a billion-dollar company, a man who had built an empire from scratch. Yet, in that moment, watching the employees below shuffle into the glass tower, he felt something he couldn't shake: doubt. For months, rumors had been trickling into his ears. Whispers that not all was well in his company. Employees don't feel valued. The culture is toxic. Managers treat the staff differently when the bosses aren't around. Patrick had heard it all. But whenever he walked the halls, people straightened their backs, plastered on polite smiles, and told him what they thought he wanted to hear. It bothered him more than he cared to admit. After all, Patrick believed he had built a business rooted in respect and hard work. But was that true, or just a facade people put on in his presence? That question haunted him, and it sparked an idea so bold, so unusual, that even his closest advisors might have laughed it off. What if he disappeared from his glass office and walked the floors as someone nobody noticed? What if he could see his company, raw and unfiltered, through the eyes of someone at the very bottom of the ladder? The thought took root and refused to leave. One evening, long after the offices had emptied, Patrick sat at his desk scrolling through HR records. His eyes stopped on a job listing most executives never even glanced at: janitorial staff night and day shifts available. He smirked to himself. Perfect. The next morning, Patrick called in just one person, his most trusted friend and assistant, Vincent. "If I do this," Patrick said, lowering his voice, "you're the only one who'll know. I want no leaks, no hints. I need to see the truth." Vincent's eyebrows shot up. "You're serious about this? You, as a janitor?" "Exactly. The only way to understand what's broken is to live it. I need to know how my employees act when they think no one important is watching." Vincent hesitated, but he could see Patrick's mind was already made up. He sighed. "Then you'll need a disguise, a new name, and clearance through HR as if you were hired normally. I'll handle the paperwork." Patrick nodded, determination written all over his face. "From today, I'm no longer Patrick Steele. I'm Paul Carter, a janitor, invisible, replaceable, forgettable, and I'll finally see what my empire really looks like from the ground floor." The first day was a shock. Patrick arrived at the employee entrance, dressed in cheap work pants, an oversized polo shirt, and a janitor's badge that looked as ordinary as he suddenly felt. Gone were the tailored suits, the Rolex, and the staff who normally opened doors before he even touched the handle. Now, he stood in line at the security checkpoint, ignored by most and looked over by some with thinly veiled disinterest. The receptionist barely glanced at him before muttering, "Down the hall, left corridor. Clock in there." It stung not because she was rude, but because, for the first time in years, Patrick realized what it meant to be invisible in his own company. He swallowed hard and made his way to the janitorial room, where mops, brooms, and cleaning supplies were stacked against peeling walls. A man in his 50s, with graying hair and tired eyes, looked him up and down. "You the new guy?" the man asked. Patrick nodded. "Yeah, Paul. Name's George. Been here 15 years. Don't expect anyone upstairs to know you exist." He tossed Patrick a set of keys. "Let's get to work." And just like that, Patrick's undercover journey began. For the next few hours, he scrubbed floors, wiped windows, and emptied trash bins. It wasn't the work that weighed on him. It was the way people treated him. Some employees didn't even acknowledge his presence, walking past as if he were part of the furniture. Others barked orders, dropping cups or papers with a curt, "Clean that up." Patrick forced himself to stay quiet to play the role. He needed to see the truth without interference. But there were moments that cut deeper, like when he overheard a pair of mid-level managers mocking the people who clean up after us, laughing as though janitors weren't human, or when he noticed a young intern, nervous and eager to please, being humiliated by a senior executive in front of others. Patrick clenched his fists in secret. Every fiber of his CEO self wanted to step in, to demand respect, to remind them who he really was. But he couldn't. Not yet. This undercover mission was only beginning, and already it was testing his patience. But Patrick had no idea that what he was about to discover in the coming weeks would be far darker, more shocking, and more personal than anything he had imagined. By the second day, the novelty had worn off. Patrick no longer felt like a man in disguise, he felt like a janitor. His knees ached from crouching over sticky tiles. His hands were raw from scrubbing, and his back groaned every time he pushed a heavy mop bucket down the endless corridors. But more than the physical toll, it was the way people looked through him that wore him down. In the boardroom, where Patrick usually commanded attention, he was now just a shadow in the corner wiping fingerprints from a glass door. Executives carried on conversations about million-dollar deals while ignoring the man who once signed their paychecks. It was humbling, infuriating, and enlightening, all at once. By Wednesday, Patrick had learned the rhythms of the janitorial crew. George, the older man who had trained him, worked quietly, humming old songs under his breath. Then there was Maria, a single mother of two, who seemed to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders but never failed to smile. And there was Trevor. Trevor was younger, maybe in his late 20s, but already bitter. "This company doesn't care about us," he muttered one afternoon as they cleaned the lobby. "We're invisible, disposable, and the higher-ups, they wouldn't even notice if we disappeared tomorrow." Patrick didn't argue. He couldn't, not without breaking his cover. But Trevor's words stayed with him, because in that moment, Patrick realized something terrifying. Maybe his company really had lost its soul. That week, Patrick saw sides of his employees he had never seen before. On Thursday, as he bent down to pick up discarded coffee cups in the break room, two managers walked in. "Ugh, look at this guy," one said, loud enough for Patrick to hear. "Bet he didn't even finish high school." The other snickered. Probably the only job he could get. "At least someone's cleaning up our mess." Patrick froze. His heart pounded in his chest, and for a split second, the CEO in him wanted to whip off his disguise and put them in their place. But instead, he just kept cleaning, head down, letting the sting of their words sink in. He thought he knew these people. He had promoted them, trusted them, and yet, without knowing who he was, they revealed their true character. But not everyone was cruel. Late Friday evening, Patrick was emptying trash cans when Maria approached him with a warm smile. "You're new here, right?" she asked. Patrick nodded. "Yeah, just started this week." She hesitated, then handed him a small container of food. "You probably haven't figured it out yet, but they don't give us much of a break. Here, homemade empanadas. I always bring extra." Patrick blinked, stunned. In that simple gesture, Maria showed more humanity than most of the executives he had sat across from in board meetings. "Thank you," Patrick said softly, accepting the food. Maria shrugged. "We've got to look out for each other, because trust me, nobody else will." Those words echoed in his mind all weekend. Nobody else will. By the end of his first week, Patrick's notebook was already filling up. He scribbled details after every shift. How employees treated janitors, who showed respect and who didn't, which managers created fear, and which employees seemed broken down by the system. But what unsettled him most weren't just the small cruelties. It was the whispers. Late one night, as he passed by the accounting department, Patrick overheard two employees whispering in the copy room. "They're skimming off the budget again. That's why supplies are always short. If anyone finds out, they won't. Nobody cares about janitors noticing. Anyway." Patrick kept walking, pushing his mop bucket, pretending not to hear. But inside, his pulse quickened. This wasn't just about respect or workplace culture anymore. Something deeper, something corrupt, was happening in his company. And if he stayed undercover long enough, he might just uncover it. Patrick looked at his reflection in the smudged window of the janitorial closet that night. His shirt was stained, his face lined with exhaustion. He didn't look like a CEO. He didn't feel like one either. But for the first time in years, he felt like he was finally learning the truth. And he knew this was only the beginning. By his second week, Patrick was no longer surprised when people brushed past him without acknowledgement. What shocked him now were the cracks he was starting to see. Not in the walls he scrubbed clean, but in the company he had built from the ground up. The empire he thought was strong was showing signs of decay. It was Monday afternoon, and Patrick was sweeping near the cafeteria. Employees streamed in, laughing, carrying trays of overpriced food. At a corner table, the executives sat together, polished, confident, loud with their inside jokes. On the opposite side of the room, Patrick saw George, Maria, and a few other janitors eating quickly out of brown bags. Their shoulders hunched as though they weren't supposed to take up space. Patrick noticed how some managers, when passing, didn't even look at them. One even muttered, "Don't they have their own room?" As though sharing a cafeteria was beneath them. Patrick scribbled a note in his small pocket journal that night. The divide isn't just social, it's cultural. Executives versus workers. Us versus them. Toxic. He had built this company to be inclusive, but somewhere along the line, it had grown into something else. Something ugly. Wednesday night, Patrick's shift ran later than usual. As he rolled his mop bucket down the hall, he heard hushed voices again. This time coming from the copy room. "We need to move those invoices before the audit," one voice whispered. "They're not going to notice. Nobody pays attention to janitors," another said, followed by laughter. Patrick's grip tightened on the mop handle. The same line. Nobody pays attention to janitors. He peeked through the crack of the door and saw two employees from accounting shoving stacks of papers into a folder marked Archive. Their eyes darted nervously. Patrick's chest tightened. This wasn't laziness or bad behavior. This was fraud. Someone was cooking the books. By Friday, Patrick's patience was running thin. He was in the executive floor bathroom scrubbing sinks when he overheard a conversation through the slightly open door. It was Trevor, the bitter young janitor, being chewed out by a supervisor. "You missed the second floor trash cans again. Do you even care about this job?" The supervisor barked. Trevor's voice was flat, resigned. "I worked a double shift last night. I barely had time to breathe. That's not my problem. If you can't handle it, we'll find someone else who can." Patrick froze, fury rising inside him. This wasn't leadership, it was exploitation. He wanted to storm out and tell the supervisor exactly who he was. But he didn't. Not yet. Because the truth was, Trevor was right. The company didn't care about its janitors. And if the CEO himself couldn't even protect them in disguise, what did that say about the culture he had let thrive? That evening, as they were leaving, Maria caught Patrick lingering by the supply closet. "You're quiet," she said gently. "Rough day." Patrick nodded, unsure how much he could say. "Just learning a lot." Maria sighed and leaned against the wall. "I've been here 8 years. I've seen people come and go. Do you know what hurts most? It's not the pay. It's not the hours. It's the way they look at us. Like we don't matter. Like we're less." She paused, her voice breaking slightly. "But I stay, because I need this job for my kids. And because maybe one day someone will see us." Patrick swallowed hard, guilt heavy in his chest. Because he was the someone. And until now, he hadn't seen them. Later that night, as Patrick emptied a trash can in one of the offices, a crumpled piece of paper caught his eye. He smoothed it out and read quickly. It was a draft email, half-written, unsent. "Audit discrepancies. We can't keep hiding this. If the CEO finds out, it's over." Patrick's pulse quickened. This was bigger than he thought. There was organized corruption, possibly embezzlement, happening under his nose. And the worst part? The people at the top were either involved or covering it up. He tucked the note into his pocket and wheeled his mop bucket out, his mind racing. This wasn't just about how employees treated janitors anymore. This was about betrayal at the highest levels of his own empire. And Patrick knew one thing for certain. The longer he stayed undercover, the more dangerous the truth would become. Patrick lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. He had set out to discover how his employees treated those at the bottom. But what he was finding out went far deeper: corruption, fraud, exploitation. His company was rotting from within. And the real question wasn't just, would he expose it? It was, would anyone believe him when he finally revealed who he really was? It was a Tuesday afternoon. The office was decorated with balloons and a cake sat on the break room table. Patrick had just finished mopping the hallway when he heard the cheer of "Happy Birthday." Everyone was laughing, clapping, singing. For a manager named Jeff, Patrick lingered in the doorway, smiling faintly. But then his eyes shifted to the far corner of the room. Maria, the janitor who had worked there 8 years, stood by herself, clutching a small paper bag of her lunch. Her birthday had been last week. No one had remembered. Patrick's chest ached. He thought of how hard she worked, how invisible she felt, how quick they were to celebrate their own, while the people who kept the building running barely registered as human beings. That night, he wrote in his journal, "A company that celebrates power but ignores sacrifice is not a company worth leading." 2 days later, Patrick found Trevor sitting on an overturned bucket in the supply closet, his head in his hands. "Rough day?" Patrick asked carefully. Trevor laughed bitterly. "Rough life. You ever feel like no matter what you do, they'll never see you as anything more than the dirt you sweep?" Patrick wanted to tell him the truth, wanted to say, "I see you, and I'm the one who can change it." But he bit his tongue. Trevor shook his head. "One day, I swear, I'm just gonna snap." Patrick knew he wasn't joking, and that terrified him. That Friday, Patrick was cleaning just outside the conference room when he overheard a staff meeting. "We're cutting custodial hours again," one executive said, clicking his pen. "It's the easiest department to slash. Who's going to complain?" "The janitors." Laughter followed. Patrick's blood boiled. They weren't just treating janitors poorly. They were deliberately squeezing them, stripping away hours and benefits to pad profits. He nearly burst through the door, ready to tear off his disguise and lay into them. But he didn't. Not yet. Because the truth was, if he revealed himself too early, they'd twist it. They'd claim it was an act, a misunderstanding. No, he needed proof. He needed timing. He needed impact. The breaking point came one bright afternoon. Patrick was polishing the glass doors at the front of the building when he saw Maria struggling outside. She carried 2 heavy trash bags, and a group of younger employees walked past her. Laughing, chatting, without so much as holding the door open, Patrick rushed to help. But before he could, one of the employees smirked and muttered under his breath, "Guess that's what happens when you don't study hard enough." Patrick froze, his heart pounding. Maria's face went still. She said nothing, just kept walking, the weight of the trash dragging behind her. That was it. That was the moment Patrick knew he couldn't wait any longer. The experiment had gone far enough. That night, Patrick stayed late in the janitor's closet. He opened his journal to a fresh page, gripped his pen, and wrote the words that would fuel his next step. "They see janitors as invisible. Tomorrow they will see me." He tucked the journal away, leaned back against the cold wall, and let out a shaky breath. The decision was made. The CEO in disguise was done watching. He was ready to act. Patrick pushed the mop bucket across the lobby floor. His coverall sleeves rolled up, blending in as just another unseen worker. For the first few hours, things seemed normal. Employees rushed past him with laptops tucked under their arms, phones pressed against their ears, eyes fixed anywhere but on him. To them, Patrick didn't exist. That's when he began to notice something strange. At first, it was the way a group of mid-level managers left their coffee cups scattered across the break room table, never bothering to clean up. One of them even waved at him and said, "Hey janitor, mind grabbing this for me?" as if he were invisible, as if his only role in life was to serve them. Patrick nodded silently, pretending to obey. But inside, he felt the sting. Is this how they treat the real janitorial staff every single day? As the hours passed, things only got worse. He overheard whispered conversations in the hallways. Some employees mocked the company's policies, bragged about cutting corners, and laughed about how the executives were clueless upstairs. Others openly criticized coworkers behind their backs, spreading gossip like wildfire. But what shocked Patrick most was how two very different sides of his workforce revealed themselves depending on who they thought was watching. Some employees, the ones no one noticed, showed kindness. A young woman in accounting smiled warmly, saying, "Thank you for keeping this place clean. Most people don't realize how much work goes into it." Another offered him a sandwich at lunch when she noticed he hadn't taken a break. These small acts of humanity stood out even more against the backdrop of arrogance and cruelty he witnessed from others. By the second day, Patrick's heart was heavy. He thought he knew his company. He thought he had built a culture of respect and fairness. But from this new vantage point, holding a mop, instead of a title, he saw the truth. Some employees thrived in decency, while others hid behind power, belittling anyone they deemed beneath them. The real test, however, was still coming, because Patrick soon found himself in a situation that would push everything to the edge, forcing him to decide whether to reveal his true identity or let his employees dig their own graves. By the third day, Patrick felt the weight of his disguise pressing harder than the mop handle in his hands. He had seen enough to know that the glossy culture he thought his company had wasn't the whole truth. The breaking point came during a high-pressure afternoon. A group of executives from a partner firm visited the office for a meeting. Patrick, still in his janitor uniform, was assigned to tidy up the conference room beforehand. As he was wiping down the glass table, the door swung open. 3 of his managers walked in, not realizing he was within earshot. "Ugh, this place is a mess," one muttered, rolling his eyes. "Don't worry, the janitor will clean it up." Another laughed, gesturing at Patrick. "That's all he's good for." The third manager smirked and added, "If I had to scrub floors for a living, I'd quit life. Can you imagine being that low?" Patrick froze, cloth in hand, his knuckles tightening around it. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. He had hired these men personally, entrusted them with leading teams, given them 6-figure salaries. And this was how they viewed people who kept their workplace running? The moment stung worse because one of them, Brian, was a rising star Patrick once considered promoting. Hearing Brian ridicule him, thinking he was just a janitor, cut deeper than he expected. And yet, not everyone joined in. John, a junior manager seated nearby, cleared his throat uncomfortably. "That's not cool," he said quietly. "Everyone's work matters here. You never know someone's story." Patrick's eyes flicked toward John, a spark of relief flickering in his chest. Maybe, just maybe, all wasn't lost. But then the partner executives entered, and the managers instantly transformed, pasting on polished smiles, oozing charm. The hypocrisy was so thick Patrick could barely breathe. That was the moment he knew he couldn't stay silent much longer. He had come undercover to learn. But what he uncovered was a hidden truth that demanded action. The next day, Patrick planned a company-wide meeting. Still in his janitor disguise, he set the stage for a reveal that would leave his entire staff speechless. The next morning, Patrick returned to the office before sunrise. His coveralls smelled faintly of bleach, and his hands were cracked from scrubbing floors. He caught his reflection in a glass door. No one looking at him would ever think CO. That thought stung, but it also kept him grounded. He began his shift in the cafeteria. Employees shuffled in, grabbing coffee and pastries, some ignoring him completely as if he were invisible. A few even cut in front of him while he was restocking napkins, muttering impatiently when he didn't move fast enough. But then came Maria, a receptionist he vaguely remembered from interviews years ago. She stopped, smiled warmly, and said, "Good morning. Thank you for keeping this place clean. It makes a difference." She even offered him a fresh cup of coffee on her. Patrick almost forgot to stay in character. He felt a lump in his throat. Kindness, so rare yet so powerful, reminded him why he started the company in the first place. Later that day, while hauling a heavy trash bin through the hallway, Patrick overheard two interns whispering, "Do you think anyone even knows the janitor's name?" One snickered. The other shrugged. "Why should we care? He's just here to take out the trash." Patrick's jaw tightened, but before he could process, another voice cut in. Sam, a young software engineer. "Hey, don't talk like that. Everyone here deserves respect. You'll never get far in this company if you look down on people." Patrick noted the moment carefully. Sam wasn't just defending him. Sam was upholding the very values Patrick thought were fading. Throughout the week, these contrasts kept building. One manager berated him for mopping too slowly, as if Patrick's time had no value. Another thanked him quietly, saying the office felt lighter when it was clean. A group mocked him behind his back in the break room, unaware he could hear every word. One employee slipped him a lunch when they noticed he hadn't taken a break. Every act of cruelty sharpened his disappointment. Every act of kindness gave him hope. But together, they built a question too big to ignore. What kind of culture had he really created, and who among his team lived up to the values he preached? By the fifth day, Patrick was no longer just observing. He was documenting, studying, testing, watching closely, waiting for the right moment to peel back the disguise and force everyone to face the truth. By the end of the second week, Patrick had seen enough. The kindness of a few employees had touched him, but the arrogance and disrespect of others left a bitter taste in his mouth. He knew it was time. Early Monday morning, Patrick arrived at headquarters not in his janitor's uniform, but in a sharp-tailored suit. His assistant, one of the only people who knew the truth, had already arranged a company-wide meeting. Word spread quickly. All-staff meeting? On a Monday? What's this about? Employees filled the conference hall, some sipping coffee, others scrolling through phones. A few even grumbled that it was cutting into their real work. Then the doors opened. The janitor they had seen all week, the man they had brushed past, mocked, or ignored, walked in. But something was different. His uniform was gone, replaced by authority and quiet confidence. A ripple of confusion spread through the room. Whispered voices buzzed. "Isn't that the janitor? What's he doing here? Why's he dressed like that?" Patrick stepped to the podium. He let the silence hang, long enough for every heartbeat in the room to sync with the tension. Then he spoke. "Good morning. Some of you know me as the man who emptied your trash cans, cleaned your floors, and pushed around a mop bucket these past 2 weeks." A nervous laugh bubbled in the crowd, quickly silenced by his tone. "But what most of you didn't know," he continued, locking eyes with the interns who had mocked him, "is that I am also the CEO of this company." Gasps filled the hall. Coffee cups froze midair. One manager went pale, his jaw dropping as if the ground had disappeared beneath him. Patrick's voice grew heavier. "I went undercover not because I doubted your work, but because I wanted to see who you are when you think no one is watching. What I discovered shocked me." He paused, letting their imaginations do the work. Employees squirmed in their seats, suddenly remembering every word they had said in passing, every glance, every sigh of impatience. Patrick continued, "Some of you showed kindness, respect, and integrity. You reminded me of the culture this company was built on. To you, I say thank you. You are the backbone of this place." Then his gaze hardened. "But others treated me as if I were invisible, as if my work meant nothing. Some mocked, some dismissed. Some looked down on me because they believed cleaning floors was beneath them. And that is unacceptable." The room fell into suffocating silence. No one dared move. No one dared breathe. Patrick leaned forward slightly, his voice almost a whisper but sharper than glass. "How you treat those you think don't matter says everything about who you really are." Patrick let the silence hang a moment longer, then lifted a folder from the podium. Inside were the notes he'd been keeping since day one of his undercover mission. "Let's talk specifics," he said, his voice calm but cutting like steel. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few managers glanced toward the doors as if calculating whether it was too late to sneak out. Patrick's eyes softened first as he looked toward the back of the room. Anna, one of our receptionists. When you thought I was just a janitor, you offered me a glass of water when you saw me sweating. You thanked me every morning. You treated me with dignity. That's leadership in its purest form. Starting today, you'll be shadowing one of our senior executives as part of your fast-track development. Anna's eyes went wide. She covered her mouth in disbelief as the room erupted into scattered applause. Patrick raised a hand, and silence fell again. Then there's Marcus, an intern. While others mocked me, you sat with me at lunch. You asked about my family. You reminded me what humility looks like. Marcus, you're getting a full-time contract offer, effective immediately. Marcus nearly fell out of his chair. The kindness he gave without expecting anything back had just rewritten his future. But Patrick's face darkened as he flipped a page in the folder. And then, there are others. He let the weight of the words drag across the room. Eyes darted. Throats cleared. Tom, senior manager of logistics, Patrick said firmly. A man in the front row froze. You told me, quote, "Move faster, old man. This isn't your retirement home." You laughed when I slipped on the wet floor. You will be meeting with HR after this meeting. And yes, your behavior will be part of your permanent record. Gasps rippled through the audience. Tom's face turned red, his earlier smugness replaced with sheer panic. And Denise, Patrick continued, his voice unflinching. A woman tried to shrink into her seat. You tossed your coffee cup on the floor and told me to make yourself useful. You will also be meeting with HR. If this is the kind of example you set, you don't belong in leadership. The tension was unbearable. Some employees were trembling, others sitting stiffly, praying they wouldn't be named next. Patrick closed the folder slowly. This isn't about punishment alone. This is about accountability. This is about remembering that respect is not reserved for job titles. It's the foundation of who we are as human beings. If we fail at that, we fail at everything. Then, with finality, he said, the way you treat people when you think no one is watching is the real measure of character. And from this day forward, that will define your future at this company. The room stayed frozen in silence. For the first time in years, every employee understood that the culture of the company wasn't just about profits, meetings, or deadlines. It was about integrity. Patrick stepped back from the podium. The janitor disguise was gone. The leader had returned. The meeting ended, but the echoes of Patrick's words hung heavy in the air long after the employees left the room. Some walked out in stunned silence, replaying every interaction they'd had with the janitor. Others, like Anna and Marcus, left with tears in their eyes, realizing that their simple acts of kindness had just rewritten their futures. For Tom and Denise, however, the walk to HR was one of shame. The same employees they had once barked orders at now looked at them with quiet judgment. The tables had turned, not out of revenge, but out of justice. Within weeks, the company began to change. Patrick set up a new Respect in Action program, where employees were rewarded not just for sales numbers or performance metrics, but for moments of empathy, collaboration, and genuine humanity. It wasn't about catching people being cruel anymore. It was about catching them being kind. Anna excelled in her executive shadowing program, quickly earning a leadership role she'd never thought possible. Marcus, the once overlooked intern, became a permanent hire and an example of how compassion could open doors. And employees, even the skeptical ones, began to realize that their CEO wasn't just pushing policies. He was reshaping the very heart of the company. As for Patrick, he returned to his corner office. But the disguise of the janitor never really left him. Sometimes, late at night, he'd take a slow walk through the empty halls, mop in hand, reminding himself of the lessons learned. Because power, he knew, could make people forget. And forgetting was dangerous. In the end, his undercover mission wasn't just about exposing cruelty. It was about reminding everyone, himself included, that no matter how high you rise, you are never above treating others with dignity. And that's the story, my friends. A CEO who went undercover, not to catch thieves or expose fraud, but to uncover something far deeper, the truth about character. So what do we take away from this? The simple, the way you treat people when you think they don't matter is the loudest truth about who you really are. Don't let this story stop here. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe for more powerful true stories that remind us of the strength within us all. And now, I'd love to hear from you. Backhand index pointing right, have you ever been underestimated or judged unfairly, only to later prove people wrong? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one.